Alright, Part 2, Unit 5, Hazmat Special Incident Operations. Alright, Hazmat Special Incident Considerations. Bombing, suicide bombings. Over the last decade, suicide bombings have increased significantly in the Middle East, especially the Iraq, Afghanistan, where our national has military presence. Since 9/11, there has not been a successful suicide bombing incident conducted in the U.S. However, the current documentation, international trends have dictated the potential first responders to these international events, developed effective public safety response guidelines, pursue the deals with the political, potential horrific events. First responders at all levels must work together. The unified command structure to identify the detail of the potential suicide bomber, the attacking locations of the local jurisdiction, and safety to respond to potential events for the suicide bombing attack occurs. Outlined in September 2003, the Department of Homeland Security Bulletin titled Tactics, Techniques, Suicide, Homicide Bombers. The bulletin provided the currency of the incidents oversee that indicate that the terrorists enter the conducting suicide operation responsible for these interests include the relatively easy with these operations conducted and executed with the psychological impact of the population disruption on the scene of the event. They raised an objective for the suicidal bombing person to carry out over terrorism against the vulnerable targets, giving the terrorists several operational advantages, even in suicide bombing instead of the remotely detonated devices. Suicide bombing device is precisely delivered with an intent of the target. Suicide bomber, sometimes referred to as identified military entry environment, as a human smart bomb. Potential identified soft hard targets can be easily attacked. Suicide bombers can drive vehicles with an designed purposely to attack a fortified location. No need to plan an aggressive getaway route with the terrorist delivering bomb. By design, attacking the bomb and no one left alive with an integrating to investigate. Single well-equipped suicide bomber can potentially wound or kill a innocent victims. Usually, human as bombs have preferred terrorist method to attack more than 30 years with the backing from the original 1983 bombing of the U.S. Marine barracks, the Lebanon Irish Republican Army, using proxy bombs in 1990, in which the victim was kidnapped and forced to drive to detonate a suicide car bomb. Approximately 100 suicide bombings executed with the Tamil Tiger Repel Group of the Sierra Lanka, beginning with the 1987 and also the 1990 Palestine Infida brought suicide bombings to Israel cities. In July 1997, in New York City, the transit police stopped with the two subjects carrying out a double suicide bombing against the subway system of the Brooklyn, New York. The transit policy see with the multiple live exposure for the devices just hours prior to the planned bombing against an additional person planned with a suicide bombing on New Year's Eve. At the end of the 1999, the suspect was identified as the Millennium Bomber. Foyle was stopped with the rest for the U.S.-Canadian border. He was found identified carrying explosive with the plan to place with a large suitcase bomb at the Tom Bradley International Airport Terminal, Los Angeles, California. The most current and devastating suicidal attack on record with the world encounter was September 11, 2001, when the 19 confirmed terrorist attacks flew from passengers airplane with the World Trade Center and Pentagon. In December 2001, Richard Reed, so-called shoe bomber, failed to take down with the American Airlines flight trying to detonate a bomb hidden in the shoe. Former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld stated in 2004 the number one threat for the new government within Iraq and U.S. forces would become the individuals attacking suicide bombers. In 2002, the FBI Director Robert Mueller stated that suicide bombs are inevitable. U.S. if it was in Center Intelligence Counterterrorism Chief Vance Caniastro stated there's no 100% defense against suicide bombers. Suicide bombings have documented within occurred within more than 30 countries: Afghanistan, Algeria, Argentina, Bangladesh, China, Colombia, Croatia, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kenya, Kuwait, Lebanon, Morocco, Pakistan, Palestinian territories, Panama, Philippines, Qatar, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, Tunisia, Turkey, United Kingdom, Uzbekistan, and Yemen. On July 7, 2005, four suicide bombings explosion in Rock Center, London during the morning rush hour. More than 50 people were killed and 700 injured. The blast occurred within a span of just 30 minutes. It was designed and coordinated in port with the first responder with a member the device built with a readily available to easily purchase commercial household chemical materials. Currently, today, the Iraq suicide bombings have become almost daily occurrence with targeting American forces for the Iraqi civilians. They increase the level of difficulty of the community for the first responder to prevent such attacks, increase the become the new phase of terrorism, and of ever-changing recent international local intelligence indicated that Al-Qaeda and other designated terror organizations have been actively expanding the recruiting efforts of the suicide bomb. The new recruitment philosophy that includes female Western-looking members, Russia, Chechen terrorist suicide bombers include women and moved down 2 Russian airlines and seized a Boston middle school, killing more than 330 hostages. Most of them were toward identified targets who were children. In the U.S., they have been numerous documented threats incidents involving explosive carried individuals that include the following. September 1995, Mark Clark killed himself and his family car loaded with explosive Baltimore County, Maryland. August 2003, the explosive device at Erie, Pennsylvania, killed an individual, possibly victim of the device attached to the neck during the attached bank robbery. October 2005, a student blew himself up with an explosive-filled backpack at a crowded football game in Oklahoma State University. Stop suicide bombings are very difficult to design and powerful. Successful prevention is not always guaranteed. Successful first responder understanding some of the basic indicators of the tactics. These key indicators of the tactics may help first responders to prevent initial attack or release the public from the secondary attack. First responders must keep in mind with a lone wolf attack of a potential mental unstable individual can bring into play same type of tactical identified with Islamic terrorism. Therefore, some of the individuals most likely will not fall into the general terrorist activity profile. First responders, someone such as the emergency AMS and law enforcement personnel should the same the priority for the suicide bombing. Planning and interagency cooperation event should be by first priority. Separate identified issue with the draft during the planning phase of the law enforcement will need to provide security crime scene preservation. Law enforcement should also provide protection of the fire EMS units entering the hot zone. This for responder safety paramount number one priority during this site. The first step of the respond with the preparation conduct the review with your agency guideline with the procedure respond with a horrific type of event with the National Institute of Occupational Safety Firefighting Fatality Investigation Prevention Program conducts investigation firefighting line of duty deaths to formulate recommendations of preventing future failures, ensuring the National Institution of Occupational Safety and Health Report Phase F 2004-11 listed the following recommendations. Department responding to the scenes of the horrific severe violence. Develop standard operating procedure responding to potential violent situations. Developed an integrated emergency communication system, including the ability to direct, relay, real-time information caller, dispatch all responding emergency personnel, provide body armor, bullet-resistant personal protective equipment, train with equipment consistently enforced with a respondent with a potential violent situation. Ensure all emergency response personnel have the capability to continuous radio contact, consider providing portable communication equipment with an integrated hands-free capability. Consider requiring emergency dispatch centers with incorporated ability to retrieve the location of individual historic data, provide pertinent information from responding fire and EMS personnel. Develop coordinated personnel response guideline with a violent situation, hold the joint training with the sessions, law enforcement, and mutual aid with the emergency response department. Long documented history of the terrorists conducting suicide bombing events overseas with enable the first responder with the potential to develop the profile of the nature of these events. Their basic elements and define the elements of this man, woman, and older child that has been suicide bombing the target. Has included buses, clubs, trains, restaurants, police checkpoints, or other public locations which are a large group that expose the people. Also known as soft targets, generally they are disregarded with the incident victims, such as children. The device has included belts, vests, jacket, backup, suitcase, shoes, and even a guitar case. The device, typically 10 to 30 pounds of explosives, can be easily hidden in clothing, other packaging system. Few bombers have been killed with an dictated by police and military forces. Some may be identified with a civilian, but must be element of surprise. The detonation may be the first and only indication of an attack. Bombers will add or assault devices, nail bomb, bolts, ball bearings, or other items to the shrapnel, hazard, chemical, and pesticide shall have the added with explosive devices. Several bombs will detonate alongside early in the Iraq year. Position containing anti-collagen prevents blood clotting of the has been used with a suicide bomb, causing excessive bleeding. Bombers have been infected with the disease with HIV, hepatitis exposure. Victims have the bomber blown apart in detonation. Ambulance have been used with the transport bombers devices recently in Iraq. Suicide bomber driven a fire truck was used to bomb against the U.S. Marine Corps outpost. Bombs have started using armed assault again against the hardened targets before detonating. Responders have been targets in initial attacks followed with the secondary attacks, and it's important for the first responder remember the profile detail of the will continue to develop. The copycat bombers attack the U.S. may choose to develop a new and as yet unseen suicide bomb attacks. Potential suicide becoming bombing incident presents first responder with a complex tactical technical problems requiring quick, logical, determined decision-making process. In most cases, most first responders will respond to post-detonation incident both, but reverse responders should be prepared to respond pre-detonation trans-incident suicide bombing events too. Definition: pre-detonation response occur with a suicide button or detonates the device. Definition: trans-incident response occur with the bomber attempts to detonate the device and malfunction does not detonate, or when the suicide bomber makes the decision to surrender prior to detonation. Final detonation, post-detonation response take place after the suicide detonates the device. Alright, the pre-detonation response. Fire department EMS pre-detonation response can identify the defining of the emergency first responder arrive at the scene before the explosion. There is a potential for the response and report possible suicide bomber. Little time will be available to law enforcement, other first responders, and interventionists suspecting any need planning to carry out suicide bomb missions. Especially when he or she is possible moving toward his or her intended potential target of the year. Some of the identified recommended tactics pre-detonation response emergency responders. Call talk dispatchers must get documented the record of the information possible to make every effort to connect the suspected callers online during the identified response with extreme specificity. Specificity is crucial. Also, ask all callers why the personnel is probably identified as suspect of a possible suicide bomber. All emergency first responders to the fire, EMS, law enforcement should approach with a potential target location, lights, and sirens. Response procedure will avoid loading potential suspect. Allow the law enforcement personnel to achieve the best approach to the scene. Park all emergency vehicles out with the suspect with a potential line of sight. The law enforcement officer will need a potential identified suicide bomber on foot, allowing maximum opportunity to maintain a safe distance perimeter from themselves and the suspect. Law enforcement emergency response procedure does not include fire and EMS personnel. Immediately, one of the first priorities establishes the properly unified incident command site with the fire of the EMS staging areas well outside of the potential hazard zone. Based on potential ever-changing the incident situation conditions, there will be an overriding need for the rapid coordinated emergency response. Establish special emergency responder task force, strike team, respond out of the staging area at the time of the conditions circumstances allow. Tactical tactics and trained tactical medics should be staffed and assigned with the support law enforcement operations. Standard operation guidelines must be implemented against use of cell phone and radios. Emergency first responders should be prepared to establish flexible evacuation, safe refuge, a contamination area, red communication accomplished for the important task will be vital. If there is an explosion, there must be controlled, coordinated emergency response with potential effective the hazard area. Emergency first responders shall never touch, handle any type of the IED or other suspicious device or package. If an identified potential suspect is neutralized, there is no explosion. Emergency first responders shall not render aid with identified potential suspect. The identified potential suspect may only be injured, and the device could be detonated remotely by a potential handler. All devices suspected packages should always be considered alive. Bomb squad members, robots must be first approached with identified potential bomber and suspected bomber. Trans-incident report. A potential trans-incident emergency response can occur with a potential suicide bomber attempting to detonate its device. Its malfunction partially detonates, or when the suicide bomber decides not to go through with it and with which around such emergency corresponding tactical considerations should include the following: continual, constant communication with law enforcement personnel assistant, essential. Potential suicide bomber appearing with a surrender by may either acting to draw in or kill law enforcement personnel, other emergency first responder. Even the potential suicide bomber sincerely wants to surrender, first responders must remember the second party handler may still initiate the detonation of the suicide bomber remotely. Should responding with first responders encounter a potential suicide bomber who wishes to surrender, minimum standoff distance must be incorporated safely, maintained at all times. Instruct the potential suicide bomber to remove all clothing, explosive devices. Once the responder procedure for the tactic is complete, with the bomb squad personnel will approach and handle the potential suicide bomber his or her clothing items, explosive device with the remote using the special robots and equipment. The first responder should never touch, handle an IED device or suspicious package. All fire, EMS, first responders will operate in standby mode for this type of incident or event. Post-detonation response. Fire department, EMS, first responders, post-detonation response. The situation consists of the response to the incident after the explosion has been taken, potential suicide bombing event, or incident can have overwhelming potential. Large number of the victim fatalities should be also classified mass casualty incident. All emergency first responders should expect with a cathodic horrific situation when arriving on the scene. Special emergency response tactical considerations should include the following: All emergency first responders must proceed to the scene with extreme caution for their public safety. The call taker, the dispatcher must get and document record much information possible. Stay online with the callers for during the response with the communication established unified command system posed for the shift. The overriding need with the rapid coordinated emergency response. Emergency response must establish unified incident command plan. Staging areas outside of the potential identified hazard area. They first arrive in the unit to conduct a rapid scene size up windshield survey, situation awareness. Law enforcement personnel must be immediately start in securing the area to disperse the crowd. Trained bomb technicians should immediately start searching potential secondary explosive devices, unloading individual suspected package with a trash receptacle of the powered vehicle during and after the emergency response phase of the incident. Potential suicide bombing in potential large number of the victims of the very traumatic, horrific injuries. Some of the serious injury victims may have no visible signs of the wounds. Maybe the victims be beyond help disease. I hope there's disease. First responders should accept the number of types of traumatic injuries result of the blast, pressure burn, shrapnel from the explosion. Properly trained tactical medics are available valuable assets for law enforcement training. Triaging victims during the after the emergency response. First responders should quickly remove the victim potential blast area with the render of the unsafe with the secure with the designated locate remote with the hot zone with the EMS personnel should conduct with the triage outside of the identified hazard of the area. First respond with the personnel should litter with a blanket in the backwards will quickly transport the victim to the hazard area with identified in triage area. All triage areas shall be conducted twice, once at the blast scene and again at the safe and secure remote triage area. All emergency response agencies shall implement local mass casualty mass facility response procedure. All biohazard issues will identify that they are addressed rapidly with the incident and can multiple traumatic injuries in one small location, many other levels. All appropriate decontamination procedures need to be implemented. All first responders should immediately evaluate scene conditions, monitor the other hazards of the chemical gases and the radioactive material. All first responders shall not touch or handle any type of the IED or suspected package. All fire and EMS shall not approach potential suicide bombing suspect or suspect remaining regardless for the is or condition on detonated with a partially detonated explosive secondary device may be present unintended. The first responder. All response procedures shall indicate bomb squad personnel and robots must be first to approach the bomber, suspect the bomber, no matter how long the wait of the situation. All first responders shall be aware of the possibility of the second device. Snipers and shooters respond with the staging area, the type of the event with the targeted emergency first responders in the past. If the emergency first responders encounter a vehicle structural fire type of the event, they must conduct the rapid knockdown considering the preservation of evidence. Unified command personnel shall assist, establish large crime scene perimeter as known as possible. All emergency first responders must leave the emergency vehicles in place and are where inside of the blast crime scene until the bomb squad can determine that they are safe too. Move them will not destroy and alter key evidence. Unified command must plan and implement proceed with intensive local, regional, national immediate response. Unified command must implement proceed with notify local, state, federal resources. Unified command must open and implement an extensive multi-day crime scene investigation. Emergency first responders must also keep in mind, remember these events will be very fluid and dynamic situation. First responders have been killed, seriously hurt at these type of incidents. Or secondary devices during the potential IED suicide bombing response. Emergency first responders should understand the plan, possibility, secondary device, and present may not deny. Emergency first responders may conduct an appropriate situational awareness. Be aware that the surroundings conduct an appropriate search for the critical area location designated unified command post and staging. History of the document of the Middle East. There has been several incidents with a secondary device which were left unattended for the emergency first responders. The same can hold true for the documented suicide train bombs in Israel and Madrid, Spain. In the U.S., there have been several documented cases of the several devices playing with the U of the emergency first responder. Those left with a convicted bomber, Eric Rudolph, of the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta. During 1999, the Columbine High School mass shooting incident in Littletown, Colorado. Several secondary devices were placed in a high school parking lot near typical emergency service staging areas. The two identified mass shooting suspects, attackers Littletown, had watched local fire department in response to fire alarms at the school in the past, planted IEDs to identify the designated areas. Alright, dispatching. Local emergency response dispatch centers should have a system of standard operating procedures in play with the dispatch of emergency first responders suspected suicide bombing IED incidents. Identifiable words such as bombs or IEDs should never be used with the radio system. Potential suicide bombing by media public cannot be listening. Is not if it is possible, appropriate procedure should be incorporated with the specific of an incident and be given over the vehicle, computer, text system, or by unit responding designated cell phones. An event with a reported actual incident with a detonation injury time can be critical, therefore overriding the need for the rapid and coordinated unified emergency response. History documented with IED detonations has also reported other types of emergency with emergency response that include the following: post-medical call with the victim burns and trauma, potential personal down, unconscious calls, personal structures or rubbish fires, potential explosion, loud booms in certain areas, scene management. Incident Management Unified Command System, critical scene management tool, emergency response agencies can use implement managing these type of horrific events. One being notified actual suspected suicide bombing incident. Unified Incident Command shall implement the 5C rules. Confirm there is the device, clear the area, control off the location, control all entry, exit point, control immediate area with a secondary device or hazard. One potential major issue addressing during an appropriate situational awareness is the so-called double tap attack. Situation rather than minutes with a suicide bomber attack is delivered. A second suicide bomber will attack the emerging first responders or gather crowds at the incident. Key element of the unified command and implement a potential suicide bomber respond with very hazardous material. Respond with control zone. The use control zones or identified as follows: hot zone, the device located; warm zone, the perimeter will be established; cold zone location with the unified control CP and staging. Unified Incident Command should immediately notify all appropriate agencies, fire, emergency, law enforcement, bomb squad, emergency management, hospital, as soon as possible there is reported incident possibility of incident. Emergency first responders shall maintain a safe separation distance, potential suspected suicide bomber, explosive, suspicious package at all times according to several identified document guidelines, minimum safe evacuation device. Suicide belt located around 10 pounds explosive of 1,100 feet. Maximum excavation device suicide vest 20 pounds excessive 1,400 feet. Final incident consideration disaster detection incident command safety security assess hazard support triad treatment evacuation recovery. Always conduct visual size of the scene as you are away from the scene. Prepare yourself mentally for what you may find. Make a visual assessment of the scene. Anything unusual. What type of incident is it? Number of potential victims. What type of the victim? Severity of the injury. How much? And will kind of help will be needed. Personal safety. A safe approach to the scene of the victim. Bystander surrounding area. Safety current areas. Unlockers pose many dangers. Very victim safety can work on my patient. Must I move him or her on a safe place to work? Scene safety consideration, be alert. Safety hazards do not enter with the be unsafely properly trained personal assess the risk. Be alert with possibility second explosive device. Staging should be occur upwind and uphill. Summary: clandestine drug labs, white powder, suspicious packaging, screen, crime scene, operation, chemical detergent, assisted suicides, the disaster acronym, and final incident considerations. And that was the completion of the part 2 of Unit 5 Hazmat Special Incident Operations.